This is a Relay Project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
Day 2 of the trade wars. We welcome you to Real Talk. I promise we don't have a calendar going. We're not keeping track, but early on it seems like this is all anybody's talking about. Welcome to Real Talk. It's Ryan Jesperson, John Hicks alongside me. And good morning, Johnny. And we are going to be talking in just a second. Neil Comeau, he's a locally elected municipal councillor, but he's also a big shot with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, just back from Washington, D.C., part of a Canadian delegation down there trying to talk sense, essentially, to the Americans. We'll find out from Neil how that went, but Donald Trump pouring gas on the fire in a speech to Congress just hours ago, talking about a dominant civilization. Yeah. Everybody's aware of the impact that these tariffs will have, not just on the Americans, but on Canada, on Mexico, and the like. I see in our Real Talk live chat powered by Park Power, the show's been going for 30 seconds. It is already humming. Nobody here is surprised about that, and I like this suggestion from Cactus Sheriff, who says Canada should maybe put tariffs on silver since the Americans like second place so much. Ooh. I like that from Cactus Sheriff. We're still owning the Four Nations win here, the gold medal at the Four Nations face-off, but of course, sports, sometimes a reflector or maybe even a platform, an amplifier of real life. We're not a sports show, but we talk when sports intersects with life. Just hours ago as well, about 150 feet from our studio, just across the street, the Edmonton Oilers were spanked by the visiting Anaheim Ducks, but you and I,
what a game!
Working here through the afternoon. You know, you can see if you ever visit our studio, if you're a Patreon supporter, you attend some of our private events, you can look right out our windows and see the buzz of 104th and 104th, this wonderful intersection, and then Rogers Place right across. And on game days and on game nights, there's an extra special energy as people are showing up hours ahead of time to hit the local restaurants and the like, all wearing their Oilers silks. And you and I were wondering, you asked the question, just you and I hanging out here yesterday, do you think they're going to boo the Star-Spangled Banner? And in fact, they did.
Yeah, I was watching the Ottawa game the night before, and it was kind of eerie to see Brady Tkachuk fresh off representing his country in USA. And they cut to a picture of him, and just the look on his face, he went back and forth with his head like no, but he can tell like he's live, right? But you could tell he did not like it. It's there's a lot of angst right now.
He's one of the most prominent American players, the captain of the team in the nation's capital here in Canada. So what an interesting position to be in. The Prime Minister of Canada, for now, Justin Trudeau, and I think I share what a lot of you were saying. It's like Trudeau, it's not like he didn't sort of undergo a dramatic makeover like Pierre Poilievre did over the last year. And that's not a shot at Poilievre. It is what it is. They made him over and it worked. But Justin he's the same guy, but there's just been this something. There's been a je ne sais quoi since he announced his retirement, and maybe it's because, I don't know, people know he's on his way out, so now they're just kind of like, steady, Justin, just hold it together. We got your back till you're gone. I don't know what it is.
Or maybe he doesn't give two Fs.
Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's now like sort of unshackled. Maybe the pressure's off because
Trudeau unleashed.
Trudeau unleashed. Maybe that can be one of our next episodes. Who knows? But I thought it was interesting. We pulled a quick clip before we get to Neil Comeau and talk about Ottawa. And by the way, we'll be recognizing and celebrating, shining a spotlight on Black history in Alberta a little later on in this episode. Looking forward to it. But the Prime Minister touched on the boos themselves. I thought it was amazing when a G7 leader, like when a world leader is talking about booing anthems at hockey games and not apologizing for it. But here's a portion of what Justin Trudeau had to say, a message directly to Americans based on Trump's tariffs. Check it out.
Act of war. Does the Canadian government believe these tariffs from Donald Trump is an act of war from the U.S.?
Canadians are not angry at the American people for this. We don't have anything against Americans. Americans are our neighbors, our friends, our partners. We do things together. We've done things together for decades and generations. This is a policy decision by the American government designed to go after the Canadian economy. This is a trade war. Yes. But Canadians are hurt. Canadians are angry. We're going to choose to not go on vacation in Florida or Old Orchard Beach or wherever. We're going to choose to try to buy Canadian products and forego bourbon and other classic American products. And yeah, we're probably going to keep booing the American anthem. But let me tell Americans, we're not booing you. We're not booing your teams. We're not booing your players. We're booing a policy that is designed to hurt us. We're insulted. We're angry. But we're Canadian, which means we're going to stand up for each other. We're going to fight. And we're going to win.
So there you have it. We're angry. We're insulted. But we're Canadian. He offers the qualifier.
And we're going to win, just like Four Nations.
And we're going to win. And we're going to win. But I like that he doesn't apologize. Now, I bet that as a matter of fact, I guarantee there's a split in our audience. I'm going to put Neil Como on the spot in just a second. FCM Rural Forum chair. He was just down at DC. I want to ask him how he feels about the anthem. But the Prime Minister, he didn't want to get into it. There's no great, we're probably still going to boo your anthem. I know there's people, I've seen it on my personal social media. Some of you probably have as well on your Facebook. I saw a good friend yesterday blasting it out there to all of her contacts saying, shame on us. Shame on all of you for booing the anthem. And you know what? Almost every single response was, hey, my friend, we're not booing the flag.
No.
We're not booing their soldiers.
No.
We're not booing those that have fought together or that have stood together. We're booing the policy. We're booing the president.
Yeah.
We're booing the state of the relationship.
We're showing our opinion.
I thought it was kind of interesting, though. No, our mandate out of the gates today is not to condone booing anthems, things like that. I know it makes some of you uncomfortable. But listen, it was on display again last night, hours before we're recording this. We were wondering how it was going to go. And then we're seeing regional responses as well. I thought this was pretty funny. If you want to show my screen at usatoday.com, look at this, how they describe Doug Ford, Canadian province leader. But this is for the Americans so they can understand it at usatoday.com. Canadian province leader threatens to cut off energy to 3 U.S. states and imposes a 25% surcharge. Doug Ford has been doing things for his reputation over the past while through the initial stages of this threatened and then very real trade war. But I thought that this was the quote that jumped out. The Premier of Ontario a couple of days ago, speaking at the Prospectors and Developers Association of Canada convention, he says, a tariff on Canada is a tax on Americans. I will do everything, including cut off their energy with a smile on my face. And I encourage every other province to do the same. So Doug Ford is grabbing attention. And how about what they've done at the LCBO? This is Ontario's. This is how sort of booze gets into liquor stores and restaurants in Ontario. I didn't know this, but the LCBO is actually the single largest liquor customer in the entire country. I don't know if you knew that. But LCBO is the single largest, and I think that they've said before that they're the largest in the world, but certainly the largest in Canada. But they've pulled in Ontario all American booze off the shelves for the good of Ontario, say their signs for the good of Canada. In response to U.S. tariffs on Canadian goods, products produced in the U.S. are no longer available until further notice. And then here's an opportunity. The back half of this is the opportunity. The sign continues, looking for an alternative. Ask our team about our extensive range of Ontario and Canada-made products. That's what every province should be doing, and for the most part, every province is doing.
Yeah, and hopefully that kind of pushes some of these senators, in the southern states down there, whiskey, bourbon, all these, importers of some of the best liquors in the world.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll tap Trump on the shoulder and say, listen, this is some of our livelihood here, right?
Yeah, White Dream's right in the live chat, powered by Park Power, your friendly local utilities provider. White Dream says, how about these rumors from senior Trump officials, tariffs maybe even coming off today or over the next few days? Globe and Mail reporting that Trump and Justin Trudeau scheduled to speak pretty much as we're recording this episode. They're saying that there could be a new U.S. tariff announcement, not expecting to pull any of them off. This on the heels of Trump's address to Congress just hours ago. But they're saying that tariffs could be lifted off certain sectors, off certain goods. We're following this story as it develops. Obviously, there's more to get to. There's a contingent out of Alberta. They're not speaking on behalf of Alberta, but it's actually a former Real Talk guest. He's going to be familiar to a lot of you. We're going to play you video in just a little bit. They say that they're speaking with members of the Trump administration about moving Alberta over about Alberta becoming a state. I'm not sure who gave them the mandate. I'm not sure who gives them the authority. I'm saying it tongue-in-cheek because the answer is nobody has given them the authority to do this, but thought we'd put it in front of you and pick your brains. All of this coming up in just a quick second, but first we've got to remind you that this episode is presented by Alberta's top online real estate school. If you're looking for a new career opportunity, or maybe you're already involved in real estate but you're looking to level up, maybe start your own thing, better real estate training starts with Relo. They've got around-the-clock online supports. They're going to help you with their webinars, making sure that you're ready to write your exam, to get licensed, and then to start practicing real estate. You can explore their pre-licensing courses on their website. That's relo.ca, RELO.ca. And don't forget, when you're looking at the Alberta commercial and residential real estate bundles, you're going to want to use the promo code Ryan100. All one word, Ryan100 will knock $100 off each of those, saving you a little money right out of the gates as you kick off your new career at Relo.ca.
Yeah, I think Lauren Corbett in our chat this morning with the comment of the day so far, banning American booze. That's the spirit.
Attaboy, Lauren. Lauren is kind of our unofficial dad joke champion. He's like kind of the king of the dad jokes.
That's a great one.
But if this is the comment of the day, it's still early in the day. So he's raising
True.
the bar. Jillian in the chat as well says, I saw some beautiful cauliflower at the grocery store yesterday. It was calling to me, she says, but then I saw it was from the States, and so I didn't buy it.
Yeah, I'm checking now too. I'm checking every label now. I'm checking, and I'm also asking questions. You know, when it says made in Canada, you know, it's 50 to 60%. When it says, you know, manufactured in Canada, that could be up to 90. So yeah. I'm asking questions now. I'm being like, you know, where are the parts inside of this speaker I'm using at the DJ event this weekend? That with us yesterday. How much of this audio equipment, how much of it is made here?
A lot of people are asking questions about where things are coming from. Hey, how about a little peek behind the curtain? All of our Real Talk merch has always been sourced from Canada, and we've told you that ever since the beginning.
Oh yeah, yeah.
I mean, here's a little peek behind the curtain before we get to before we get to Neil. But we have our Real Talk mugs. We're pretty proud of them. I think that they've become somewhat iconic. The shape, the look of them. We've been dealing with a company out of Calgary for a long time. I won't get into the weeds and make this boring, but they've stopped with the certain mug and they say you can get the same mug. We go, great. They make us the contact. We draw the line. And then as we're looking at the quote, what do we see at the bottom? This tiny little thing, USD.
Yeah.
So our team member, Katie, follows up and says, what's up with USD? And they say, well, actually, these mugs will now be shipped from the United States. We canceled the order.
That's
a small thing. It's a small thing, but that's $3,000. That's $3,000 that is not going south of the border. All right? That's just the way that it's going to go right now. I see a lot of other, in our live chat powered by Park Power, Nick watching us on YouTube. What's up, Nick? Says, partial tariffs coming off today is not enough. Says reverse it all and pay for the damage done. That from Nick. I don't know if you're going to get Trump to pay for anything or to acknowledge that he's done damage unless it sort of suits his narrative. But Nick, I'll take your spirit. Let's ask Neil Como what he makes of all this. Neil's literally just back from Washington, D.C. He's a municipal councillor out in Sturgeon County, but he was representing the Federation of Canadian Municipalities as their Rural Forum chair. Neil, thanks for making time for us. For the people listening on the podcast, you got a big world map behind you. Isn't it interesting how we're all kind of reevaluating the entire world order right now?
Yeah, I'm just sitting in my office, and that's always there because I always would dream of where I'm going to try and go next. But, I just got back from DC last night at 6:00, and it was a long 4 days. Definitely took a lot out of us. We had many presentations there, which was great. We're at the NACO conference, which is National Association of Counties, which is basically our counterpart at FCM. FCM represents 2,000 municipalities across Canada, 92% of the population at this point in time. NACO, they have 3,069 members, of which they only represent about 50% of them. So you had still a big smattering of Republican, Democrat people in the crowd. We were well received. We were down there talking about the effects of tariffs and what it was going to do to Canada, but also what it would do to them.
Yeah.
We brought armed with stats. Connect to Canada, and then you can figure out from a district level what that's going to do to their economy if these tariffs come in. And, again, you just were talking about possible counter tariffs, etc., how that's going to affect them. And we showed a lot of people that they didn't even know that, Canada was their number one trade partner from their state. As an example, Georgia was a good example. They didn't know that. There were a lot of members that had no clue. There were a lot, obviously, in the Great Lakes area, all the border states, they definitely know that. Had a gentleman from Minnesota say, I import, pork from Canada and then finish it off in the United States. And he said, I know that I'm going to be paying more as of Monday, or actually I should say Tuesday. And that's going to affect my bottom line. His margins are going to be impacted. And the agricultural sector down there that we met with, they said, we feel like we're the first tip that's going to get hit, especially with, spring is coming and you're going to be planting crops. And potash is another one that was brought up multiple times. And they know that where do they get most of the potash? I think it's about 75-80% is out of Saskatchewan and out of Canada. And those effects are going to really impact their livelihoods down there. The auto industry is prepped. They're actually stating that they think it could be up to 550,000 jobs lost in the U.S. market. They're talking about vehicles going up in price from, we initially estimated 3,000 to 4,000 for a lower end vehicle. And now we're actually hearing from some of our sources down in the States, anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 for a vehicle. The energy industry, we spoke with people about that. That's obviously very important here in Alberta. And, we told them, in all reality, your fuel is going to go up anywhere from 10 to 20 cents a gallon. And people in the crowd just kind of gasped and went, affordability is another issue. There were some people in the crowd, Ryan, that spoke about, Canada hasn't taken the border seriously. And that's what it's all about. They kind of, a lady said, I speak Trump. She was very open about that. And
she said, I speak Trump?
She said, I speak Trump. That was her exact wording in a meeting, which kind of set the tone for the meeting. I'm not going to lie to you, because everyone at the table kind of went, okay, now where do we go with this one? But, by the end we did, I actually pulled her aside and just had a personal conversation with her outside of the group. And I said, do you realize how this is affecting not only Canada, not only my home municipality, but it's affecting the world? You guys I don't think they're so insular. I don't think they really understand it. I said, what you guys are doing is affecting everything around the world right now. And she actually came to me and said, thank you. I didn't actually really think of it that way. And I was, again, kind of shocked, but that's what we're down there to do, is educate and talk about things and establish relationships. And so this is my second trip in the last roughly two weeks. I was down there initially with another group of people. FCM, we do have a dedicated staff member on this file, and I think she's going back next weekend to DC again. This will be her fourth trip in the last 3 weeks down there, and we're just trying to really establish relationships and get them to understand that we need to impart on them as U.S. citizens and show that, yes, they know the impacts are coming, but when they are coming, they need to raise that further up the ladder, talk to their senators, talk to their representatives and say, this has to change. We can't go on this way. We know, and we got, told many times, you were talking earlier and you said, or Justin Trudeau was talking about your friends, your neighbors, your partners. They all said the same thing. The amount of people that came up and apologized to us, they're giving you hugs and you don't even know these people, but they're your new best friends. They said, this isn't the way we think. We don't know what to do right now. We're just trying to figure it out. There's the picture for you, of course. The general populace down there, didn't matter what side of the fence, they realized this cannot happen. So, do I think we need to jump to counter tariffs? Maybe that's the language he wants. I think we heard loud and clear that the border was the main issue that they wanted to be talked about. We tried to tell them that the Canadian government spent, before these tariffs were even mentioned, $1.3 billion. We've got the fentanyl czar. We talked about the steps that he's outlined. And they actually, some of them stood in the crowd and kind of just shook their heads and kind of crossed their arms and said, that's not happening. We're like, yes, it is happening. And we can go down to our premier, what she's announced is going to happen. I tried to bring them on board and say, okay, even at a provincial level, so compare provinces to states, this is what's happening. And they kind of went, well, that's not what we're hearing. So the messaging, I think, is an issue, and the communication.
I've got a private DM here from a friend of mine. She's raising her family in Seattle, and I haven't talked to her for years, Neil. Like we're university pals, and she reached out of nowhere. And she just says, I'm so sorry about the United States right now. Like, I think she follows some of our narrative. Obviously, she's following the show a little bit, but she says, I'm so sorry about the United States right now. This is a message out of Seattle. She says, it is shameful how we're treating your country, a friend and an ally, so badly. She says millions of Americans strongly oppose this and are horrified at this ridiculous treatment of Canada. Just know that not all of us are crazy and stupid. Much love to you and your family. That's from my friend Kelly in Seattle. What do you make, by the way? I said I was going to ask you about this. Just you're a local guy, Metro Edmonton Region, Sturgeon County Councillor. When you hear boos bouncing off the rafters when American hockey teams are visiting, the Star Spangled Banners getting jeered, how does it make you feel?
You know what? It's everyone's prerogative to do what they want, and that gives them an outlet. So how do you argue against it? It's not something I would do. I mean, I've also been a proponent, even in the West. I've never loved the friendly Trudeau flags that some people have either. I don't think that's the right way. I think we need to be respectful with each other. Because the general populace, as you just mentioned in that DM, the general populace doesn't feel that way. But maybe that's a way that he's going to hear things. I don't think so. Truly, I think that it's all about the Benjamin. So we need to figure out that way how it's going to affect his people and the general people on the table. Around those tables we sat at, we're very fearful of how it's going to affect them.
Neil, did you get the sense that there was some sort of, I mean, you're talking about people coming up to you and kind of hugging you and apologizing, and yet at the same time, obviously, everybody right now, I mean, Canadians are doing it. We talked about what Doug Ford's doing, what Danielle Smith's doing, what individual business owners are doing. They're kind of looking after their own. They're looking after themselves. There's a bit more of a protectionist take on this. I like Horse Lake Ranch in our live chat says, basically, it shouldn't have taken this to get us to this point, and I 100% agree with that. I mean, there are some silver linings here. I'm not trying to pretend like this isn't going to be painful for people. I'm not trying to pretend like this is not a thing, because it is, to have the relationship like this. But America looking to protect itself first as well. And quite frankly, there's really nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with America first if you're running to be American president. There's nothing wrong with Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney and Chrystia Freeland saying they'll put Canada first either. That's what we would expect. But give us a sense of like the tone of the relationships. Like, is there still, do you think, an appreciation of the mutually beneficial nature of the relationship?
Yeah, there is. A gentleman from, again, Minnesota, he spoke about when you lose our market share, it's hard to get it back. And he's fearful that the U.S. economy is going to lose our market share and not get it back. And he could be right. I think he is right, because I think, if we have to look at what are the positives coming out of this, and not to sound like a Debbie Downer, there's a lot of negatives, but the positives are we need to get our interprovincial trade figured out. That is first and foremost. We got to get that figured out. And if we can do that, and we do a lot of our value add in the agricultural sector or the energy sector, if we can create more of that here, that's what we need to look at. That's our short-term fix, but I think that's also a long-term goal. This is, us going down to DC, and the premier's going down, this has been ongoing for a bit. This is not a short-term thing. This is going to be a long-term play. Even NACO's CAO said to me, he said, this was ongoing when the Biden administration was in, and we had trade talk issues then, I should say. And he said, it's even more pronounced now, but he said, 4 years from now with the volatility in the U.S. Market, it very well could be another Democratic government down there. And he said, and I think we need to continue those talks then. So this is it's going to be a marathon, unfortunately.
Yeah, Jill's watching, says she's grateful for your work and trying to get the message through to Americans. So I know you got a lot to get up to now. You're just back from DC, but what's one thing to leave us with? It feels like this is, we describe these types of stories in the news business as very dynamic. Like the details are changing by the hour. But what's one thing? I mean, right now, Neil, you're talking to people that are very politically engaged with this audience, but you're talking to a lot of entrepreneurs. You're talking to a lot of younger people that are, post-secondary students that are kind of paying attention to this and seeing this clash between these two countries really for the first time. And there are elements and members of our audience as well, community members on fixed incomes, on retirement pensions, a big fluctuation in markets, the drop in the Canadian dollar, investments plummeting. The stock markets are reflecting this early on. We'll have more insight on that next week, by the way. So what's your takeaway from a guy that was like in the room, in the halls of power 24 hours ago?
I think there is there is a way out of this. I mean, again, it's not a quick fix. We need to continue these conversations. We're talking about going back to NACO's conference again in Philly. That's one where we can establish even more relationships and give them the tools and strategies of here's how we think things could be fixed. Again, make sure they're talking to their counterparts and getting it up to their senator state level, which, we had a lady, we were in a meeting, the ag meeting, and she instantly sent a message out to her representative, who is a Republican, and, said, this needs to be fixed right away because this is going to affect us all. So those relationships need to continue. We're not backing down on this file. We're, let's just call it doubling down. We're going more and more. And I think that we will continue to represent our municipalities, rural Canada, all of Canada, I should say, for that matter, as best as we can. And that's not just us. This is a Team Canada approach. This is, Premier Smith. This is all the premiers. I was down there when Doug Ford gave his speech with the Chamber of Commerce, U.S. Chamber of Commerce. I was there for that. And everyone in the room, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce president, ironically, a smart guy named Neil, for that matter, he agreed wholeheartedly with everything that Doug Ford was saying. But it was, we need to get this further up the chain of command so they understand how important this is. So, is it all doom and gloom? No. Do I think we need to prepare for a little bit of hard times right now? Quite possibly, especially in Alberta with agricultural and energy, even though energy is 10%, but that's still a big number for us.
Oh, yeah, man. Like, People are going, oh, it could be 25. It's only 10. It's like people need to recognize 25 can be crippling. Like 10 is a lot for a lot of businesses. And I'm not talking specifically oil and gas here. I don't want to get out of my depth, but you talk to a lot of businesses, the profit margin is less than 10%. So when you start talking about 10% tariffs, it's a huge deal. Neil, it's great to see your face again, my man. And on behalf of the Real Talk Live chat, a lot of people indicating their appreciation for your advocacy and the advocacy of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. Thanks for making time for us on the show today. I don't know if you're jet lagged or anything like that, but it's good to see you.
I got a little of that. And I will just have you one final note. At our wrap up at the Canadian Embassy, we had a lot of members there, and our second VP, Kathy Valentino, did shout out about the win at Four Nations. That was brought up. And we did give them that.
What's the point of winning if you don't remind people that you won?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, Neil. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you.
You got it. Neil Como's the Rural Forum Chair for the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. That's obviously coast to coast to coast. You can check him out online at fcm.ca. He's also an elected councillor out of Sturgeon County. A shout out to Real Talkers in Sturgeon County. A whole lot of you chiming in on this. And how about this from Don, who says, my next door neighbor in the apartment, he's an American. He's working at our communications hub in Ottawa. He's so embarrassed about what's happening right now with President Trump and those who surround him. Don says, I told him we're not mad at him. Look at this. The Canadians, I love you guys. I love us. I love you guys. Everyone's like protecting the feelings of everyone, reminding them we're not mad at you. We're not picking a fight with you. Elder Taz, what's up, Elder Taz, watching us on Facebook, says, I, for one, am glad to see the Canadians are becoming more informed regarding Canadian-made products. There's been a lack of awareness over the last 30 years at least, she says. Support Canadian business. Amen. 100% agree. Others, Susan says, power to Canadians. I'm so proud to be Canadian. Thanks to your guests for all they're doing and for all they're bringing to us. That from Susan, who indicates her appreciation for the show as well, watching on Facebook. We appreciate you, Susan. Thanks a lot. So there's kind of a consensus here. I like the comment from Horse Lake Ranch as well about expanding our exports regardless. Alberta Girl says it's a fantasy that tariffs are coming off today, but it is making the Dow stabilize. Stabilize. Wouldn't that be nice? Another personal thing, by the way. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about personal finances and things like that, especially as polite Canadians. We're not supposed to talk about politics, religion, and sex around the table. It's like all we talk about on Real Talk. But yesterday, so as a family, so we have an investment, and every single month it comes out. It's like a direct debit kind of a thing. But John, it debits in USD, and so like it's never the same amount any month, right? And yesterday we made the family decision to just like bite the bullet and pay it out, because I'm like I'm just and again, I'm not a financial analyst. We'll get Marshall McAllister back on here from North Road Investment Council. Guy's the sharpest guy I know in finance. But a lot of people are wondering right now, what's the Canadian dollar going to do? And in your own household or with your own investments or with your vacation future or cash you're holding or whatever, chances are there's implications, right?
I was at an event last night with a room full of 175 mortgage brokers here in Edmonton, DJing an event there, and all they were talking about was obviously just the market reaction from Trump. I mean, literally when he was doing his address yesterday, they had a ticker. I was flipping back between MSNBC and Fox and CNN, and there's a ticker in the corner of just the market slowly ticking down as he's speaking. It's just incredible.
Yeah, Jay Draw watching us on YouTube says, I want to see bagged milk in Alberta grocery stores. So Jay Draw wants to see supply management lifted. Wise Kyle, by the way, as I shared our pulling our order of the new Real Talk coffee mugs, don't worry, there will be I know our website right now is showing they're almost sold out. I think there's like 2 left, but we'll have new ones coming. But Kyle says, Jesperson, he says, you just pulled $3,000 out of a small business in Calgary. He says, SMH, shaking my head. He's shaking my head. Number one, Kyle, how would I run my business and you run yours? But number 2, pal, the point I made, maybe I didn't clarify, is that the supplier out of Calgary is no longer offering the mugs. They said if we wanted the same style, they told us where we could find them. We could find them at a similar supplier in the United States.
Still using
them. Fuck no. So we're still going with Canadian companies. We're keeping our money in Canada with intent. And we're one of like 1 million businesses across the country that are doing this. Yep. This is how we do it. And listen, I want to get to something in just a second because I see one of you chirping one of our sponsors in the chat, and I'm not afraid. I can't wait to hit it head on, but not quite yet. Not quite yet. First, I want to let you know that these dynamic developments internationally oftentimes put Canada's economy in peril, quite frankly, really can be a real threat. And we've got to make the right choices here at home. And that's why investing in world-class research and learning that's going to fuel Alberta's prosperity is more important now, quite frankly, than ever before. We cannot afford to underfund academic staff at the University of Alberta because we can't afford to lose the teachers, the researchers, and the students that we need to power Alberta's future. And that's why we're putting a call to action out there. We want you, Real Talkers, to visit supportthespark.ca and help keep our future strong. You can send a message to the powers that be, including the provincial government. This is a message from the Association of Academic Staff of the University of Alberta. Now, Johnny, we don't usually do this, but you saw that comment from Jacob Black.
Yeah.
Who's watching us. And Jacob, we appreciate you tuning in. He says, I see the title of this episode, Canada Strong, and then the first thing I see, he says, is California Closets, LOL. Oh, my friend, oh, my friend. It's my pleasure to remind you that California Closets is a proudly Canadian-owned and operated franchise based in our home province of Alberta. California Closets has always been committed. The live studio audience loves that detail. They've always been committed to supporting our local economy. They manufacture their products right here in Alberta. They source primarily from Canadian suppliers. And the California Closets brand is a Canadian-owned brand. And they've just put a note out. Their ownership, Cameron and Joelle, have put out a note on their California Closets Alberta Instagram about their commitment to sourcing locally. They say it's important more now than ever before. Small businesses like theirs, like California Closets, the backbone of our nation's economy, creating jobs, investing in communities, and contributing to the strength of Canadian industries. They talk about the impact of tariffs on their business, and they say that's why California Closets is doubling down on their commitment to the Buy Canadian initiative. They're keeping their supply chains in Canada, and they're making sure that everybody's hard-earned dollars stay north of the border. They say every purchase you make from a Canadian-owned business reinforces our economic resilience and self-sufficiency. We are proud as hell to be partnered with the Canadian brand owned in Alberta. You can find them online at californiaclosets.ca. It's a big week for our friends at UCAN Youth Services and quite frankly, for anybody that knew the force of nature that was Kyle Dubé. We lost Kyle a year ago on March 3rd, and this week we're remembering his legacy This was the guy that just made it happen at UCAN Youth Services right up until his passing. And we recognize his legacy and the incredible impact that he had on the lives of young adults, primarily 18 to 25-year-olds, that just needed somebody to show some faith in them, that just needed somebody to give them an opportunity, an education, or an employment. This guy was a game changer. And today, the team at YouthCan is pressing forward admirably in his honor. You can learn more about Kyle's legacy on their website. Consider making a donation in his honor today at youcan.ca. And I got a shout out for those of you that are looking for work right now. Maybe you got a month or so. Maybe it's this spring. You're looking for that new opportunity. If you have your ticket, if you're an electrician, if you're an apprentice, if you're great at sales, HR, if you're an engineer, if you're working as an office manager, Kubi Energy is growing faster than you'd believe. Canada's fastest growing solar company, as they approach their 10th birthday, by the way. Shout out to Kubi. And they're hiring in all 4 of their locations: Lethbridge, Edmonton, Calgary, and Kamloops, BC. You can find out more details on their website, kubi.ca. That's also where you can click to get a free solar quote. Nobody installs cleaner than Kubi. And of course, every Monday, or the first episode of the show every week right here on Real Talk, they proudly present Positive Reflections. Ken K in our live chat, powered by Park Power, says he's got a trip to Palm Springs next month. Says, I haven't canceled it yet. He says, I keep hoping that the adults in the room will start speaking up in the U.S., but it just goes to show people are, I mean, it sounds to me like Ken's saying if nothing happens in the next few weeks, he's going to be canceling that trip. Mm-hmm. People are serious about this. People are real serious about it. Meantime, Jillian, back on the cauliflower, says, I did put the cauliflower back on the shelf, but I'm not canceling the trips I already paid for. Sorry, she says, I'm a mini trader. Okay, Jillian.
Yeah.
A mini trader.
Yeah, little here, little there.
A mini trader.
Whatever you can do. Like people were saying, this morning I'm listening to several shows on the way to work, and they're talking to people on the street, and a lot of people are saying, like, it's hard. They're going through. They're looking now over the last 24, 48 hours, and they're not realizing how many American products, American-made or American imported products they were actually using, and they're trying to find supplementary, products, and it's difficult. So whatever you can do, I mean, no one's going to be 100%.
100% correct. I agree with you. You do what you can. You do the best you can. I'm looking forward to our conversation in just a second with Bertrand Bickersteth. We're talking about Black history in Alberta. He's doing fascinating work at Athabasca University, in particular the history of Black cowboys in Alberta, but he's written about a bunch. It's going to be an amazing interview coming up in just a second. But we have to put this on your radar before we pause the tariff talk for just a moment. We have to put this on your radar. Jeff Rath. Do you remember this lawyer? Jeff came on here. He's one of the fieriest guests in Real Talk history. He joined us mid last year with Eva Chipiuk, another lawyer, and the two of them spearheading this effort. It was a class action. It is a class action. Taking on the provincial government, Alberta, taking on the federal government around vaccine injuries, COVID vaccine injuries. The interview exploded. It went off the charts. And Jeff, just a really bombastic guy, obviously very opinionated. Remember, he just came on and just tore a strip off me right out of the gates. Hadn't even said anything yet. It was hilarious, to be quite honest with you. But Jeff has now taken it upon himself to speak on behalf of Albertans, I guess, about joining the United States. Now, I think this is absolutely bonkers, but I wanted to put it on your radar. Here's Alberta lawyer Jeff Rath.
On Alberta statehood?
Well, there's a group of Albertans that are working together right now to put together a delegation to go to Washington to talk to the Trump administration about Alberta petitioning for U.S. statehood. It's quite evident that we're being governed by idiots in Ottawa who don't understand that we can't afford a trade war with our largest trading partner, and rather than simply apologizing to President Trump for not meeting our NATO commitments and not adequately securing our border, apparently the Trudeau government has decided to declare a trade war and run up trillions of dollars in costs like they did during COVID on a made-up emergency. So there's a number of us in Alberta that have had enough and want to go speak with the Trump administration about the benefits of Alberta joining the United States.
Okay.
What was that, a 3-gallon hat? What do they call that? It's a little small.
All hat, no cattle. No, I don't want to sit here. Listen, if I'm going to poke fun at Jeff Rath, I'll do it with Jeff Rath on the show so he can defend himself.
Okay.
That's
Sorry,
Jeff. That's kind of how but that's kind of how I like to roll. But I will say, and by the way, the independent journalist interviewing him, that's Rachel Parker, formerly Rachel Emmanuel. I may have known her. David Parker's wife, by the way. Whether or not that's relevant, I think it is a point of interest in talking about Alberta and where this is going. But I just, number one, Who gave it? What do you mean you're talking to the Trump and you and who? You and influential people talking to the people you know in the Trump administration about Alberta joining the what? But I'll tell you one thing. If anybody remotely connected to Alberta's premier starts talking about this, or we find out there's a tie or there's some collaboration or cooperation, this is going to be an absolute firestorm. I have read some rumination on how Alberta could join the United States, and I think that this is different, friends. This is different, and I'm not saying I take it seriously, but I'm not saying I don't, because you never know with a trade war and Donald Trump and everything else trending the way it is. One of you in the chat said, keep in mind, Trump's been president for like a month, right?
Feels like 8 years.
Like he's been president for like 40 days, maybe 40 days in the desert for Canadians at this point, but you never know how this could go. The point being, the one thing I'll put out there, and I'm not saying that this is coming from the Alberta legislature. I'm not saying that Danielle Smith is talking about this. We still have our request in with her, by the way. We're hoping for next week. We'll see. Maybe the week after. We'll see. We'll keep talking about it until she comes on. This talk of Alberta joining the United States, it's different, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's different than talk of Alberta separation, because one of the things about Alberta separation that is just so preposterous, so ridiculous, is that the proponents of it seem to believe that it would be easier to get Alberta energy to Tidewater, to international markets if you left. It would be easier to get pipelines through BC or across the rest of Canada or through Manitoba or wherever you're going to go with it if we left. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous on a number of levels, including the military and passports and all the other things. But with open arms, the United States prepared to welcome one of Canada's most prosperous and naturally rich, these resources, these natural resources, one of the provinces. I mean, this would be a plum. This would be a crown jewel for the United States, and they would swallow us up immediately, just like Donald Trump says he wants to swallow up Greenland. So it's a different story because the appeal could be, we'll build pipelines like yesterday, right? It could be an entirely different story. Correct me if you think I'm out to lunch. If you think I'm way off on this, let me know. To talk at ryanjesperson.com. I'm not saying it's time to take these threats seriously. I'm not saying I take what Jeff Rath is doing seriously, but I do think it is notable. And I'm curious to know where Real Talkers land on it. You as a dual citizen, you might be in a prime position to sort of like lead our contingent, John.
Prime position in quotation marks. And that's how I used to feel about being part of America. I used to be proud that I was from America. I feel like growing up in Canada, I had a uniquely Canadian experience, but I always felt American. I always had a connection to it. And now it kind of, I don't want to, I'm not ashamed, but there is this asterisk kind of hanging over me now when I walk around, right?
Yeah.
Like even today, we're talking about our opinions and booing the national anthem and how I kind of agree with that's kind of Canadians' megaphone right now. But at the same time, just going back to the anthem, it's, no one's disrespecting the flag or the people who fought to create the nation.
It's
and
not
all
about
these things. We're just trying to say the tone right now, and going to Greenland as well. I'm sure you saw Denmark doing a press conference as well. It wasn't really, it's not on the news right now. It's getting pushed below Trump and Trudeau and Pierre and Carney and everything. But in a press conference, he literally said F off. They bleeped it out, but he said Donald Trump F off. So
I mean, how about this from Method, who says, true Canadian patriot right there. All these guys. I mean, I saw Whiteroom's comment too. All these domestic terrorists say of the Freedom Convoy coming out as pro-American, hardly surprising. They just need to get the hell out. Yeah, what was with all the Canadian flag waving at the Ottawa occupation? Now all of a sudden everybody's ready to leave? All of a sudden it just seems to be the most short-sighted, ridiculous. Hey, listen, you want to focus on something positive about Alberta? You want to talk to somebody who has told Alberta stories in a way that nobody else has and is continuing to do so as the 2024-25 writer in residence for Athabasca University. What an honor it is to welcome to the program Bertrand Bickersteth. He has been exploring the question of what it means to be black and from the prairies for the better part of his career. You've likely heard of his collection of poetry, The Response of Weeds, the recipient of multiple awards. He was anthologized in Best Canadian Poetry for a couple of years, including this year. His current project features the history of black cowboys in Western Canada. He's instructing at Olds College, living in Calgary, and joining us live today. It's so nice to see your face. Thanks for making time for us, my friend.
Thank you, Ryan, for having me here. That was quite a hard shift I think we were making from Trump land to poetry. And you know what? If I can, you did a good job of shifting, but if I can just interject one idea,
Yeah.
one thing about Jeff Rath and this whole idea of a new state, I think that people like him and Trump even have not really thoroughly thought this through, because if Canada were to become the 51st state, with a population roughly the size of California's, we could become the most influential American state. And very much along the lines of California, would probably tend to vote Democratic. And I'm not sure how many electoral seats California has, but we would get, at least that. And so probably would shift the electoral map slightly. But that's just my fantasies thinking out loud.
No, it's not fantasy. We talked to, economist Todd Hirsch.
Yes.
We talked to Todd about this on February 12th, and he lays it out exactly what you were talking about. He says, listen, like, Trump better be careful what he's asking for. He says, because we could turn the House, we could turn the Senate. Like, this could be bad news.
Great.
Bad news.
Well, it turns out I'm a genius.
Oh,
I didn't realize that.
You didn't need
Incredible.
that to know that you're a smart fella. Hey, listen, let's. I mean, and maybe I'm guilty of a bit of a hard swerve. Pivoting from Alberta, leaving to the history of Alberta, and particular Black history in Alberta. But you've taken this on not just through Black History Month, but this has been almost, a big part of your life's work, and that is that celebrating, recognizing, and even telling many of the relatively unknown stories of Alberta through its first 100 and so years.
Absolutely, yeah. And frankly, it has become a life story for me, largely because growing up here, I didn't know about any Black history. Nobody shared it with me. And when I accidentally stumbled across it, I realized that, the more you scratch the surface of these things, the more you discover. And it's not just Black history, quote unquote. And by the way, thank you for actually inviting me outside of the month of February. If you cannot believe how abandoned I feel the rest of the year, like, believe me, yeah. So I appreciate that. But it's not even just when you scratch the surface, you discover all these things. But so it's not just Black history we're talking about, but what you discover is this sort of multi-voiced choir of history in which Black voices also speak. And so it's all of Albertan history that we're missing out on when we don't engage these other histories as well.
Horse Lake Ranch is watching us and says, I only know of John Ware. He says, I'm very curious to learn more. There's not only been one Black cowboy in Alberta's history, and respectfully to John Ware, the city that you live in, the city that I grew up in, does have a school named after John Ware. I remember learning about him a tiny little bit as a junior high school student, but just barely. Our knowledge of Black history, not just in Alberta, but in Western or cowboy history, so to speak, is relatively meager, isn't it?
It's very meager. And actually, while part of my project over the years has been to identify those areas of Albertan history that we see as iconic, agriculture and farming and even fur trading, and to uncover the Black history of those areas. And cowboys was just one more of those. So you're right. John Ware is the Black cowboy that we go back to and look at. But as I said, when you study these histories, you scratch the surface and discover much more. Part of what I did when I was researching history is I kept thinking to myself, could there only have been one Black cowboy? Like, does that even make any sense? How could that have been? And of course, there were many more. So I'm not sure why John Ware was the only cowboy that we focus on, but my favorite cowboy happens to be a guy named Green Walters, as well as several others who you could identify as kind of adjacent to the cowboy world, such as Charles Dyson, who lived in the Pincher Creek area, and his wife as well ranched with him too, Eliza Dyson. So there are many, many names out there. And if I could just throw a very quick pitch for my friend and writing colleague, Cheryl Fogo. She has done a lot of research in this area as well and has helped me actually to uncover many of these names. If you haven't seen her film on John Ware, go right ahead. But there are many others as well out there.
Talk to us about if we look through Alberta's history, sort of like 1905, and I guess even before, obviously there were people for thousands of years, obviously before, but the community, sort of like not just outside agriculture, but rural communities. There were several I don't know if you describe them as settlements or communities that were predominantly black in Alberta that made great contributions to Alberta, including very early on in the province's existence as Alberta.
That is correct, yes. And I wish that this fact alone was something that we learned in school. So there are several communities that were started and settled by predominantly, I don't mean predominantly black people, but these were communities that were predominantly black. They were settled and started by black communities. And we don't hear about this, and it's very unfortunate. So, for example, Keystone, which now is better known as Breton, this was actually started by black communities. The history of this involves the racial struggles that African Americans had at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century. So after slavery was abolished, and that's in 1865, there were a series of laws that were slowly put in place to hamper and hinder the freedoms of black people. People just were not comfortable with black people having freedoms after they were freed from slavery. And so this is where we get all these segregation laws coming into play. A lot of people think of slavery as the time in which all the terrible things happened against African Americans and displaced Africans. And this is true, certainly. But after slavery, the legalization of these things took place, and it became even more difficult. So in the South, many African Americans were moving to try to find better places for themselves. And Oklahoma happened to be one of these places where they thought they could settle before it was a state. Because so many of them were moving to Oklahoma, this caused problems for the white people in Oklahoma. And so they started to persecute black people. As a result of that, the black people then shifted their attentions to other parts of North America that were being advertised. And of course, Western Canada was advertising for homesteaders to come at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. For whatever reason, we in Canada did not think that people, black people, actually read newspapers or had their own newspapers. And so we placed these advertisements in their newspapers as well. And so they came. They came in large numbers, and we estimate that there was roughly about 1,500 of them that came in this brief period between 1905 and 1915, roughly in this decade. And this started many of those communities that you are referencing. There are about 4 rural communities that they helped to start. And also, unfortunately, Ryan, also kicked off a kind of anti-black racism as well that ultimately closed the door on any further black migration coming here, which is part of the reason why many of us grew up around here with not very many black people at all. It's because legally they were prevented from coming from the very beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, let me ask you about that, because, you know, we sort of, as Canadians, we like to, I don't know, do we give ourselves a pass? We kind of do. Like, as Canadians, I think we're you know, we open the show in earnest talking about how we're always apologizing for this, that, and the other, and everything. And I know that we're, you know, people are in the chat are saying, well, there's no slavery in Canada. Or we always like to talk about how it's you know, the United States, it's so polarized and there's so much racism down there, and then we kind of give ourselves a pass. And I guess there's probably been a forced awakening over the past number of years. I think with residential schools and obviously the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the history of Indigenous people in Canada. But like, what was it like for black settlers and for new Canadians, new Albertans coming here? And can we talk about it's not like there was no racism in Alberta. It's not like there is no racism in Alberta, right?
That's exactly right. We do give ourselves a pass. It's not even kinda. We do give ourselves a pass. So when I was growing up, I was full blank told to my face, point blank told to my face, there is no racism in Canada. Racism is an American thing. And as a young person growing up here, that was actually very confusing to me. Because I am Canadian and I absorbed all those myths about Canada as well, but I would experience racism. And what would happen to me is, you know, I would kind of point out, you know, well, this happened to me, and people would deny that it was racism, right? They'd say, oh, no, that way he was just joking, right? That's humor. That's
you don't get it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that would make me feel as though I was wrong, and that, oh yeah, well, there is no racism in Canada, so I guess, yeah, that was me. I was wrong. And that's the problem with the past that we give. because the truth is we just don't have a true historical understanding of these things. People will comment about there was no racism in Canada. Sorry, there was no slavery in Canada. There was slavery in Canada, right? We had to abolish it. In 1833, it was abolished. We say there's no racism in Canada. Clearly, there is racism in Canada. That's why those black migrants were prevented from coming. We stopped them from coming. So yeah, we totally give ourselves a pass. And I think the difficulty here is not just in the United States being the kind of proxy of racism for us, the boogeyman, but it's in us not wanting to confront our own historical truths, our own historical realities. And if I can just wrap up that thought by pointing out that our individual experiences often do shape how we perceive our national sensibilities, our national perceptions are shaped through that. And so if we can just take a moment to step back and to actually think about how our individual experiences may or may not be representative on the national level, that's going to give us a little bit more leeway to recognize that, yeah, Canada also has its flaws as well. But if we recognize them, we can do something about them.
If you're just joining us on the Real Talk live stream across 7 social media platforms, we're talking to the Athabasca University writer in reference, presented by California Closets, by the way. It's Bertrand Bickersteth, and we're going to have where people can follow you on social. We're going to have your website all listed in the show notes on the podcast and on YouTube. Colleen is watching us live on Facebook right now. Bertrand says, she says she went to the Brenton Museum. Says, I heard about how they used sweat and blood to make the land farmable in Breton. And I asked the folks at the museum, where did all the black farmers go? And why is this community so white now? I mean, why didn't the land get handed down and the wealth stay in those families? She says that the museum staff said, well, farming's really hard work. That's a loaded response, but I digress. Says, I'm sure that there were hardships due to race that caused the land to not stay in the hands of those families. She's wondering if you could speak to that.
So that is partially true, yes. And the farming is hard work is also true as well. But to link those two together, there was and there has been throughout the 20th century a general trend of the modern world becoming more and more urbanized, and it requiring more and more land to for one person to earn a living. And so it became very difficult. But because the ongoing migration of Black people was stopped, we have to remember that the group that came essentially was it, right? And so then what happens is that small group does what they can, yeah. But generally speaking, it's hard to maintain the coherence of a group, of a community, if you're isolated and you're small. And so often these groups would connect with each other across the province even, as well as in Edmonton and Calgary, where there were larger communities available to them. And so we have the phenomenon of many of them moving to the city as the century progresses, as well as we have the communities themselves sort of thinning out because of a lack of more migration, and also to a certain extent because of integration as well. So these were folks who came up from the US and wanting to escape racism. They came into a country that had this very loud megaphone blaring out that we don't have racism, we don't have racism. And that's what they wanted. They wanted that. And so they accepted that, and they wanted to blend in. They wanted to fit into the group. And so they tried their best to do that. And I don't know, you may have heard this with immigrant communities, in which the first group that comes in, tries their best to integrate, and then the next generation doesn't learn like the language of their parents and the culture of their parents very well. And this is because the parents just wanted to kind of keep that from their kids so that they don't stick out, they don't stand out. And unfortunately, this is also a way of sort of thinning the community. So the communities were they were vibrant for a while, but by the mid 20th century, they started to peter out. And I would say by the 70s, they really did start to peter out. Many people had moved to the cities. Many people had integrated with white communities as well. And there is some truth to the fact that it was difficult for some of these people to maintain their land because of racist attitudes. But that is only one piece of the puzzle.
Alicia's watching us right now. She says, "Thank you, sir," in our live chat. She says, "I'm Black and was born and raised in central Alberta." Alicia says it is extremely disconcerting being told that what you're experiencing and witnessing is not really happening. You've spoken, you've written about like, I guess you'd say, becoming a stereotype to escape stereotypes. Can we get into that? What you mean by that?
Absolutely, yeah. And thank you, Alicia, for that comment. I don't see you, but I see you. All right. Yeah, very, very difficult. So people are driven by the myths around them. And in Canada, we were driven by our particular Canadian myths. And so I was not allowed to be myself because we had a myth that there's no such thing as a Black Canadian. In fact, there is a writer and a scholar, George Eliot Clark, that some of your listeners may have heard of, who comments that the hyphen of African Canadian or Black Canadian is actually a minus sign. So you can be Black and not Canadian, or you can be Canadian or not Black. And this is a kind of aphorism that we all just accept it. So the identities that I was allowed to have were imported stereotypes. So I was allowed to be very athletic. I was allowed to be funny. Oh, nicely done.
That's a good production team right there, Bertrand.
I'm super impressed. Yeah, folks, that's George Eliot Clark right there.
There you go.
I was allowed to be kind of funny, like sidekick funny, and I was allowed to be angry. And being an angry young Black man suited me because I was angry. Because as Alicia pointed out, it is very frustrating for somebody who doesn't have your experience to define your experience for you, to tell you what your experience actually is. But when you're young and you yourself believe these conflicting ideas, it creates conflict in you. And so I just felt frustrated, and I knew that if I expressed anger, somehow this resonated as a viable identity with some people. Like I could actually be a true and proper Black person if I showed anger. So for many years, I did that. I was just an angry young Black man. And just to give you a quick example of that, if somebody very innocently used the word boy around me,
sure,
like very, very innocently, right? We could just be like, in physette or something like that, or playing a sport or something, and someone says, "Hey, good job, boy," or something like that, I would instantly go into a fury and start yelling at them. And I have to tell you, I was young enough when I was doing this, like maybe 12, 13, where I didn't even fully understand what is this thing about boy? Like, what is it exactly? I really didn't fully understand it. But what I saw was that it made even male adults, white men who were in charge of me, it made them freeze. Yeah. So I saw that there was power in it. And so I latched onto that and I used my anger for many years. Of course, folks, using anger as a way to live your life is no way to live your life. And we might even argue we are seeing anger as a policy being exported out of the United States right now through their government policies. We might argue that. But it's no way to live your life. And so for me, finding the Black histories and uncovering them and leading myself back to Alberta and back to the place that I had felt had rejected me when I was young, that got me out of the anger. And so I'm very pleased to see that your support for academic support staff. Truly, we live in an upside down era where the things that can help us, that can show us truth and objectivity, are currently being attacked and currently mistrusted. And academics and education is one of those things. It actually saved me. It saved me from being angry, and it's helping other people as well as I spread that knowledge. And so, yeah, stereotypes, not good for a while, about 7 years, I would say. They helped me out. But ultimately, the way is just to educate yourself and to become a better person.
I just want to say I have so much respect for guests that'll come on here and talk about like their personal journey, and you talking about, I guess, the role that anger played. I agree. It's not good for your mind, your spirit, your soul, to be driven by anger for like 75 years, but to be fired up for a little bit and then to find a way to chat. No one will listen to this interview with Bertrand Bickersteth and say that the guy lacks passion. You are full of passion. That is clear. Was there like a moment in your life? Can I just get personal for a second? Was there a moment like with your sort of like your creative evolution with when it came to like your writing and your poetry and the arts and that sort of avenue of expression that allowed you to kind of like channel or maybe sort of like redirect the anger into a new passion?
Yeah, I would say that the moment came through my mom, actually, because when I was, well, it's actually 3 moments, but to wrap it up quickly, when I was young, about 13, when I was feeling this anger, my mom once said to me, and we were living in Calgary. I should just let your audience know I've lived all over Alberta. I actually started in Edmonton and then moved to Calgary for junior high and part of high school. And then I moved to Olds, Alberta. So I also know central Alberta. But when we were in Calgary, my mom said to me once, out of the blue, I don't understand why these white people think that there are no black people here. There are black people that were born and raised here, and they don't even know about them. And me at 13 thought to myself, what is she talking about? That's insane. There's no black people born and raised here, Mom. And, you know, I'm a 13-year-old. And of course, your parents, when you're a teenager, they're like the least reliable source for anything on the planet, right? And so this in particular, to me, felt like she knew nothing about it. On top of the fact that my parents are immigrants from West Africa. And when I was growing up, really didn't know anything about Canada. And so I always did feel that maybe sometimes legitimately that they didn't really understand my world. So when she said this to me, I thought, oh, what is she talking about? Here we go. But it stayed in my mind. It stayed in my mind. And then when I was a university student, my mom introduced me to a book that she had. And she said she went to this book signing and it was by Cheryl Fogle. And Cheryl Fogle, the person who I mentioned earlier who had helped with studying Black cowboys, she had written this memoir of her life. It's called, and I'm really curious to see if your production team is going to pull this one off. It's called Pouring Down Rain, and it's a memoir of her life. Cheryl Fogle was descended from these African Americans who moved up from Oklahoma and homesteaded here in Alberta. And she wrote about her life growing up in Calgary and growing up Black in the 1960s and 70s. And so, fantastic read. And when I read that, I thought to myself, holy cow, my mom was right.
Huh.
And because of that, I realized, you know, the whole world is upside down. And for me, it was like, what was that movie? The Truman Show. Yeah. Where all of a sudden, like the world gets revealed to you and you see like, holy cow, it has been a sham all this time. You know, when they told me, no, that's not racism, it's you and all those things, I realized, no, it was never me. It was never me, right? It's been a sham. And that was a huge moment for me. And from then, I did really start to focus on pulling out those parts of history that have been overlooked so that I could focus on expressing myself, who I was. And then, you know, my mom tells me I've always been a writer, even from the time I was very young. So then it was very easy for me to turn my writing towards a topic that I felt I could legitimately occupy. And so my writing topic, my poetry, is the same as my research, my historical research. It is to share the unspoken truths, the unspoken stories of this land that we call Alberta today, and to uncover the Black sides of those stories that we don't know about. So yeah, thank my mom for that.
I will. We do. Shumbaland is watching us and says, I only, look at this, Bertrand, you're building community in real time. Shumbaland says, I have only just subscribed to Real Talk on YouTube because of this segment. Says, I hope to see more of these. Says, thanks for the warm welcome. There's so much to explore. and this is a good start. That from Shumbaland. And I've got to give a huge shout out to RH, who watches us, an incredible audience member near Windsor, Ontario, kicking $300 into our YouTube super chat right now, which is incredible. Says, my ancestors came to what was then Sandwich, Canada. I'm learning about this right now. Actually, thanks to RH, thanks to you, Bertrand. I'm just referencing Wikipedia as my source. Old Sandwich Town, located on the, maybe you can tell us about it, on the Canada-U.S. border of the Detroit River, established in 1797, considered one of the oldest, most historically significant settlements in Ontario, the site of many significant events in Ontario's history, now a neighborhood to the city of Windsor. But RH goes on and has a question for you. Says, my ancestors came to then Sandwich, Canada, to escape the U.S. in the late 18th and early 19th century. Says, we are very nationalistic and loyal to Canada to the point of militancy. What is Bertrand's position, or your impression of the position of Black Albertans when it comes to this 51st state business?
I am quite certain. So first of all, I'll say I don't think I can speak for all Black Albertans in that kind of way. We have a different sort of connection to community out in Alberta and in the West than they do in Central Alberta and Central Canada and Eastern Canada as well. But what I will say is that in my immediate community and what I know of people who I interact with, nobody is buying this 51st state situation. And that is a little bit ironic, I have to tell you, because a lot of us feel a very strong connection to what we call the Black diaspora. And that is just simply the presence of Black people throughout the Western world, even though we may not have a genetic or a cultural or a national affiliation. We're drawn together in our historic and social achievements through this thing called Blackness. So for us, the border has never really existed in that particular way. Yeah. At the same time, we do feel very strong allegiance to our national sense of self. And here I'm going to have to depart a little bit from what I was suggesting. So what I mean is we don't feel American, right? But we do feel as though we can connect to African Americans and the history of African Americans, because in the past that border didn't exist, right? So the flow of people back and forth across Canada and the US historically has been a very regular and very free-flowing thing. And part of the history of Black people in Canada involves the history of Black people in the United States. However, I will say on a personal note, I actually struggle with feeling fully Canadian. Even though I 100% oppose the 51st state idea, it's ridiculous. And I think other than maybe Jeff Rath and a few other people, no one else is really buying it.
Sure.
I do struggle with it. And that is simply because growing up here, I was always made to feel like I could not be from here. So people would always ask me, where are you from? And if I said here, they would say, no. Again, telling me what my experience is. No. I mean, where are you really from? Right. And what that does is over time, it really does make you feel like you're not allowed to be from here. And on top of that, recognizing that even our school curriculums don't include representations of Black history at all, sort of reinforce that. So for me, I have a personal kind of ambivalence with feeling Canadian. At the same time, I would say most Black people in the West and Alberta are opposed to the idea of a 51st state. It's patently ridiculous.
Thanks for such a thoughtful response to that question, to a great question from RH, but I really appreciate that. Can we wind back? I know the audience would find this fascinating. We talk about, like, in particular, your work right now. And by the way, we'll link to this. The team at Athabasca University has done a great feature on you at athabascau.ca, is released right when you were named AU's writer in residence. You can see it here. But you're doing some work in particular. And us as communicators, and we pay a lot of attention to, like, brand and fonts and these types of things. You're looking into, like, old cattle or, like, what do you call, like, ranch brands, like brands for horses and cows, right? And in particular, were they green? They were Greens brands, Green Walters brands, or?
Yes, that's right. Yes. So I'm really glad you came back to this because, remember I talked about the word boy and how I didn't really fully have a sense of what that meant. obviously, the word was loaded because it was applied to Black men, regardless of how old they were, what their expertise was, or anything like that. But you were just a boy if you were a Black laborer. There has been some research to suggest that the word cowboy itself might be an indication of the legacy of Black history, the presence of Black people on ranches and being cowboys. Because there are many words that we have in history for people who work in ranching and who work with cattle and things like that. There are cowpokes and cowhands and cowboys and ranch hands and all kinds of words.
Sure.
But the word boy was always in the 19th century applied specifically to Black men. And so the theory is that the word cowboy is a legacy of Black people working in the cattle industry. Now, I wanted to study brands, cattle brands, because I felt as though part of the missing voices of Black history were failing to find things outside of conventional literacy. So if it's not written down in a text or something like that, it doesn't exist. And so I wanted to research these things that are kind of different from that. And as I mentioned to you before, I'm also interested in the iconography of Alberta. And so cattle brands, I felt, melded these things together. There you've got a lovely image of Green Walters cattle brand. I went back into the historic brand books, Alberta's brand books, and I looked for brands that were registered by Black cowboys. Here's Green Walters. It's a beautiful, beautiful brand. It's the double ox yoke brand. As you can see, it's like two humps. Those are two ox yokes that are joined together. And I think that this brand is poetry, and it's part of the reason why I do this kind of research. One of the terms that used to be used for slavery was to describe it as being in the yoke or under the yoke of slavery. And this was very commonly done, very prominently done in the 19th century. So that brand that you just showed was from 1889, that brand. And it's very likely that Green Walters, who came from the United States and then came up to Canada, he worked on the Bayou Ranch at the same time as John Ware, though we don't remember Green Walters. He was there. It's very likely that Green Walters came from, or certainly experienced or witnessed enslaved Africans in the United States. Likely was himself an enslaved African. And so for me, for him to take on this cattle brand, which is the yoke cattle brand, the double ox yoke brand, for me, he is taking that term, the yoke of slavery, and he is reinvoking it as poetry. It's his brand now. And to think in the past of how heinously and horrifically Black people were actually branded themselves as slaves. So their flesh was actually used in this manner. The fact that he is using this brand in this way, to me, signals a kind of mastery over that history. He's saying, you know, I used to be branded a slave, but now I can be the one who's in charge of my own brand. And for me, that is absolutely poetry. And it's one of the reasons why, Ryan, I wanted to take those cattle brands and use them as the basis to design a font so that once the letters are all composed, I'm in the middle of it, those shapes of all those brands from those Black cowboys whose histories were forgotten can now be used as actual letters that people can now type out. And I'm going to be using it for my poetry, but I'm going to make it available to everybody freely.
Freely?
I know, crazy, right? Those symbols will bring those brands back to life, so that those cowboys whose identities, whose brands have been forgotten, will be back to life as well.
That's so cool, man. We just showed the responsive weeds. People can learn more about it and access more of your poetry, learn more about you and connect with you at BertrandBickersteth.com. You're lighting a fire under people, by the way. Jillian just writes, Jillian says, great guest for real. Harrison says, what a fantastic interview. But I know I touched on this in your bio, but sometimes when I'm reading bios, I'm just kind of trying to get to the end because I want the conversation to start. Do you know what I mean? So let's circle back on the fact that you've been anthologized in Best Canadian Poetry, not pretty good Canadian poetry, not Canadian, best Canadian poetry 2 out of the past 3 years, which is, are you, I'm not like, what's your, to the Responsive Weeds, exploring what it means to be Black and Albertan. There's been an incredible response to this. What does that say to you?
It's very heartwarming. It is very heartwarming to return to my days in which people were telling me who I was rather than me being able to tell who I was. Part of what they were telling me was that you cannot be a writer, right? So when I was young, I had all kinds of basketball coaches and football coaches and track coaches chasing me down in the hallway saying, you gotta, come on, man, you gotta be on our team, before they knew anything about me. But I never had people from the chess club or, the student newspaper or anything like that, Nobody came to me saying, I think your intellect is valuable and we would like to use that. For people to recognize it today is so bizarrely different from what I experienced when I was young, but at the same time is so reassuring because I want those poems. I want poetry in general that speaks from the Black perspective in Alberta. I want it to provide the kind of relief and the kind of validation to other people, regardless of their race, who have felt that kind of hemmed in being self-defined. So to be recognized on that level is just both shocking to me and extremely heartwarming. I feel nothing but gratitude for that. It's a wonderful turn of events for me.
Hey, when your font's done, and let's find a cool way. Like, obviously we can't wait to have you back on the show, but let's find a cool way to do it. We'll do like kind of a visual collaboration and roll through it, and you can take us through letter. You know what I mean? Like, let's do something really cool with it. I would love to do this. So we're booking you now. You let us know when it's ready to go, and we'll do it.
You better believe it, folks. Absolutely. I look forward to that.
Hey, well, we've been looking forward to this conversation for a long time, and you're doing absolutely fascinating work. Bertrand Bickersteth, our guest, he's Athabasca University's 2024-25 Writer in Residence. You can check out the show notes for more on the work that he's doing there and his other work, The Responsive Weeds, among it. I think it's safe to say that regardless of our background, our ethnicity, our perspective, all of us have learned something from you today. And we sure appreciate that. That's what we endeavor to do every day, Bertrand, and I thank you for that.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ryan. I really appreciate it. And thanks for doing it outside of February.
Of course.
I'm serious about that.
Okay.
Thank you.
You got it. I want to thank Alicia as well, by the way. Alicia threw something back into our chat. The chat just blew up during this, which is awesome. Most of it good, not all of it good. But Alicia says there was an exhibit at the Royal Alberta Museum. I don't think it's still running now. By the way, we always talk about proximity to our studio. Royal Alberta Museum, that could you hit a 5-iron? Could you hit it with a 5-iron from here, do you think?
I don't know.
Maybe a driver. That's like a 3-wood from here. It depends. I'm watching.
Crazy talk to me, golfer.
It's close. It's close. Anyway, Alicia says there was an exhibit there called I Am From Here. And she says that was excellent while it was there. That's something I'm going to have to dig into. I feel like I was scribbling notes. Like, this is how my brain works, everybody. Like, this is what papers look like when I'm done interviews. But she was referencing that and how that made an impact on her. But when he started talking about that, like the where are you from? No, where are you from? Or like, where are you from? I couldn't help but notice that it really resonated with our live chat. And I bet for the 95% of you that'll be watching this later or listening to this later, that'll resonate with you as well. Send us a note. Let us know your perspective. That's something like you hear it every once in a while. You hear somebody ask it and you just even as a white person, you just cringe. You're like, you can't, people don't ask that. You don't ask that of white people, I guess, unless maybe you hear it's just kind of this, here's the white, my perspective. Here's my internal perspective on this is unless somebody has a strong Eastern European accent, nobody ever gets asked that. I have never personally, have you ever personally been asked, where are you from? Never.
No.
Never.
No.
And most people don't know, just like a mishmash of places. But just the experience of a visible minority in Canada and in Alberta, in our context, in our provincial perspective, is one that I think, regardless, like I said, regardless of ethnicity, regardless of perspective, is something we want to explore more. Tobias says, I have to admit, that was a great and interesting guest. That's awesome. Ben says, what a fantastic guest. Typically, it's kind of funny. We don't always pump guest tires so much when they're on, but I'm just reflecting. It is my job to reflect what this live audience powered by Park Power is saying. And obviously, this is something. So he brought this X factor to the table that really landed well with you all.
I learned a lot. Yeah. When people ask where I'm from, I say Pangea.
Come on. Okay.
No, but it's the most ridiculous question, and we know what you're doing. We know what you're really asking.
We know what you're really asking.
Where are your people from?
Yeah.
How the fuck would I know?
Where are you from? I'm from here.
It was 200 years ago. What are you talking about?
No kidding. Some of you, a lot of you are all sharing your family backgrounds. This is great. More and more people, I think, are trying to figure out more of this 23andMe, all this kind of stuff, people tracing their family roots back. I wonder how many of us have had this passed down, like the old school effort. There was always kind of the one family historian that was keeping the family tree, and you kind of go back, and I don't know, sometimes it would go back 4 or 5 generations. Always interesting to kind of know the roots, but sometimes along with that unearths some difficult truths about people's family histories. I don't know if you've experienced that. We always welcome your feedback, short form or long, whether it's a comment on our YouTube episodes, a comment on our posts on Instagram, TikTok, X, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find us everywhere. And, of course, you can send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We've got more to get to. I want to talk about Trump and Greenland and want to get to your comments. But, of course, it is Wednesday and spring break is upon us, and it just feels like a perfect time to be reminding you about the opportunities to make memories in the crown jewel of the Canadian Rockies. And of course, that is Jasper National Park. My Jasper Memories, presented every Wednesday by our friends at Tourism Jasper right here on Real Talk. And there is a ton of stuff coming up in March in spring break. If your family is looking for a way to get away, this is one of the most beautiful times of year. The temperatures are more mild, but there's still a ton of snow up at Marmot. The sleigh rides are still there. And then, of course, the wildlife is reflecting spring realities as well. It's a wonderful time of renewal. And at jasper.travel, they've got a wonderful blog out right now. 5 keys to an unforgettable spring break in Jasper. I'm putting this out to those of you that are maybe up for and willing to pivot, to make a last-minute, spontaneous decision to head out to the Rockies, to head out to Jasper National Park. Check this out, Johnny. I want to feature this blog post in particular because they've done a really, really nice job with it. Look at the smiles on these faces. The snowshoeing in Jasper National Park. Nothing like that. But if you're looking to escape the classroom and head outdoors to celebrate the warmer temperatures, here's a few ideas on what you can get up to. Number 1, hit the trails. Thousands of kilometers of trails to explore. Cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, even hiking this time of year. It works for a truly stupendous setting. You can take a flight up Whistler's Mountain on the Jasper SkyTram and then rent a pair of snowshoes so you gain that elevation. The SkyTram is going to open for the season on March 21st, so make sure you have that circled on your calendar. Of course, Marmot Basin, this time of year, there's nothing like spring skiing, my friends. The absolute best, and Marmot is ready to welcome you. They've got that new knob quad chair I was telling you about. They got blue runs, they got black runs off that chair, and it pretty much takes you right to the top. So families will love that. Over 450 centimeters of natural snow falling at Marmot through the entire ski season. Really, really fantastic. The local cuisine in Jasper, I can say, and John, I take this very personally. My culinary reviews of the town of Jasper, they have leveled up their offerings like nothing else over the past while. And I'm saying even in light of the challenges they faced since July, big adventures require big fuel, and there are a few new hotspots you can check out, including the newest, the Moline Range. Last time I was out in Jasper, I was posting on my stories about this. This is that new distillery. It barely escaped the fire. Did I tell you their opening day? Opening day was fire day. Can you imagine? Crazy. And so they hadn't even opened their doors yet. Thankfully, firefighters were able to save this beautiful new restaurant and distillery. You can check that out there. They've got Terra for authentic ingredients. Evil Dave's, one of my favorite spots, of course. And then they've also got the Jasper Pony Express running, so you can hop on, hop off this shuttle service, which is so great. It's like a charming horse-drawn wagon, which adds a really scenic touch to your your evening plans. You can, of course, walk through the bottom of a canyon, Moline Valley, and other canyon ice walks, which are phenomenal. You can check those out online. And don't forget, as mentioned, the wildlife, spring when nature and animals truly come out to play. You can join the Sundog Tour Company or Moline Adventures on one of their wildlife tours. There's a really good chance you're going to see elk, deer, mountain goats, coyotes, maybe a moose if you get lucky, all while taking in the awe-inspiring views around you. Look at that, the Athabasca River this time of year, just absolutely stunning. You can read more. We'll post the direct blog link in the show notes here, or just visit jasper.travel yourself. Spring break in Jasper, there's nothing like it. Get the family together, get the friends together, step outside of the classroom, get away from work. You deserve it. My Jasper Memories proudly presented right here on Real Talk every week by our wonderful friends at Tourism Jasper. Ben says it's so awesome to hear about that Moline Range, the distillery. I can't even imagine. I don't want to get too into it, but can you imagine if you had you made that such a big investment to open a place like that, and all of a sudden this wildfire is roaring into town. You haven't even opened your doors yet, but it's just an unbelievable job that they've done there. And how about this? Tony says she wants to go to Jasper for a big milestone birthday. Tony, I don't know which one it is, but happy birthday in advance. Says, I just want to go to a chalet and eat good food. That sounds pretty fantastic.
Oh, I love it, especially not just around Christmas. It just feels like I love the whole ski, snowboard community, and then just being in the cottage kind of atmosphere. Yeah. It's like Whoville, Ryan. It's like Whoville.
Sean's calling me out here. Sean says, I don't know what Jess was talking about with that new knob chair, that quad. It's a total grind.
What?
He says it's a real workout. Hey, Sean, you're not wrong. I'm just saying.
You are out exercising, Sean. Like, that's the point.
Hey, if I get, we've been getting a little personal. I've been sharing some personal details this episode. I will say, Sean, like, when I wrote it, my legs were a little more sore a little earlier than I would have liked. So put it that way, but that might be more of a me thing as opposed to a mountain thing. I don't know. And Sean, I also hope that maybe you and I, our paths may cross one day at Marmot Basin. Who knows? I always love when people come up and say hello. So great thing going on there. Donald Trump addressing Congress just hours before we're doing this episode, and it was people are saying, well, it was, very partisan. It was obviously sort of a stump speech type thing. I mean, obviously, number one, he's just been inaugurated in the last 40 days or so ish, and he's also Donald Trump. So, like, what do you expect? He operates a little bit differently, but it was his comment on Greenland that I think is getting the most attention. But it's kind of interesting because it's a little bit it's slightly atypical of Trump in the sense that he's wisecracking. Like, I mean, I think some of his stuff, people go, this has got to be a joke. The 51st state stuff, that's got to be a joke. And then you go, no, in fact, it's not a joke. Like, he's serious. He doubles down. Reporters ask him about it at Mar-a-Lago. He says, no, I'm serious. I'm deadly serious. The Canadian delegation comes back. Remember that? It was, Dominique LeBlanc, I think, and Justin Trudeau, whoever it was. Remember around that dinner table at Mar-a-Lago? And they came back and their report, yep, he's serious. But, speaking of Congress and about Greenland, I mean, let's play the clip. And you tell me, I mean, I'm sure he would take Greenland. I'm sure he wants Greenland. He can't have Greenland. Everybody involved says you can't have Greenland, but he's like laughing. Everybody's guffawing. There's a few jeers in the back, but check it out. Here's POTUS.
And I also have a message tonight for the incredible people of Greenland. We strongly support your right to determine your own future. And if you choose, we welcome you into the United States of America. We need Greenland for national security and even international security, and we're working with everybody involved to try and get it. But we need it really for international world security, and I think we're going to get it. One way or the other, we're going to get it. We will keep you safe.
So the whole, like, and then he goes into that sort of guttural, like, one way or another, we're going to get it. And everybody sort of laughs and chuckles, but it's like, I saw Aaron Rupar is one of the follows that I pay close attention to on Twitter. And he just goes, like, it is the president of the United States. It is the commander in chief of the world's most powerful military saying one way or another, we're going to go get Greenland. Now, if it is a joke, and if he is joking, and if he's trying to get a rise out of his opponents, which is very much possible, you've also got to consider the context. This is the president of the United States addressing Congress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a remarkable statement.
Sidestepped the military, talking about, military occupation of a sovereign nation. It's wild. But we knew this was going to happen. We knew every day would be like a soap opera. I just didn't know it would get going this quick. I mean, I didn't think by, before spring, we would be talking about, invading sovereign nations. Looking at the market yesterday was just wild. Like, I don't often watch like the NASDAQ and all these, financial programs, but I was glued to it all day because it's immediate. And the funny thing about the tariffs thing is, like, he must have a team of financial advisors, smart people. The guy's all about money and business. How is he not listening to them when every person who isn't on, Fox Business News or whatever is saying, yes, we get what you're trying to do with tariffs, but it's not going to be good. And from the very beginning is going to be an onset. The market is going to feel it. We're going to feel it. The nations you tariff are going to feel it. I just don't see how this is a smart move at all. Unless he thinks this is immediately going to force a chess move into a checkmate with Canada to do their bidding, and Denmark and Greenland and whoever to do their bidding, and Mexico to do their bidding. But it doesn't look like that's happening.
RH back in the super chat. Thanks, RH. Says he's just vile. We have a surprise for him and his gang of Confederates in Canada. Tracy wants to point out there was booing from some congressional representatives, and there certainly was. You could hear it in the background. Cactus Sheriff says Trump is a hostile, militaristic foreign leader not being checked by his government. Take it seriously. And I'm reading it like that because Cactus Sheriff is coming to us in all caps right now. Denise simply says Trump doesn't understand that there can be two winners in an agreement. That's an insightful comment from Denise. Like it's like the whole approach to negotiating. The guy who, and I know you're going to write in and say you're going to tell me he didn't actually write it, Ryan. The Art of the Deal. Trump didn't actually write it. They put his name on it. There's a ghostwriter. Everybody knows that. But
contributed for sure.
The guy who's known for the Art of the Deal, the guy who obviously he said it just the other day when he was talking about a deal, when he was talking about how he's got to treat Vladimir Putin. He says, my whole career I've been making deals. There's different approaches to deals, right? Like you look at, I always use sports metaphors, but like you look at trades. There's trades that make sense. There's trades that don't make sense. There's like Luka Doncic going to the Lakers that makes absolutely no sense whatsoever in the world. And then there's some trades that work out great. The Dallas Stars sending a young prospect by the name of Jerome McGinley to Calgary in exchange for Joe Nieuwendyk, who goes and helps them win a Stanley Cup. Great trade for all involved. But you're right. There's different perspectives. There's different mindsets on who wins a deal or what represents a winning deal. We're going to get Marshall McAllister from North Road Investments on the show in the next short while to we want to protect our investments. We want to better understand what markets are doing. But I do want to credit David Berman at the Globe and Mail doing great work as their investment reporter. You can check it out at theglobeandmail.com. The headline from today's report, the stock market doesn't like Trump's tariffs. I mean, no shit. Says, but that might not matter anymore. And let's look at some of the numbers here, John, because when you get down to it, the S&P 500, 24 hours ago, extending a weak stretch that began mid-February, falling as much as 2%. Now, you will go 2%. That's a big deal. Falling 2% in trading, recovering some ground later in the day, ending the volatile session down 1.2%. The blue chip index has fallen 3.6% since Trump swore in on the 20th of January, down 6% from its high in February. The NASDAQ, one of you Real Talkers referenced that earlier today. The NASDAQ has fallen into correction territory, a decline of 10% or more from peak to trough on Tuesday. Canada's S&P TSX Composite Index slumping almost 2% on Tuesday, dragged down by financials, industrials, and energy stocks. I mean, it is down. This is in wild. The red.
Yeah, and you have people in the chat now saying, that's what he wants to do for his people in the financial sector who are backing him. They want to loot the market, right? You want to drive stocks of companies down, then their cheap take over. But it can also have the adverse effect when the companies absolutely implode and then there's nothing to buy. So this is like super dangerous stuff. And we immediately yesterday, when I knew I was going to this mortgage brokers event, I was like, oh my, all we're going to be talking about is Trump. And that's all they're talking about. All they're doing is watching those ticking stocks and just being like, we knew this was going to happen. We just didn't know it would take effect immediately.
Well, and I think
the second he started talking.
Isn't that interesting that you're hosting? I know it's not lost on you, but isn't it interesting that you're surrounded by like 200 brokers whose entire, like how many people? I mean, if we
all they're saying is buy a house right now. Well, if you have money, buy a house right now.
Because, that's what they always say.
But you know what I mean? mean? Like
because when the Bank of Canada, when the rates of borrowing change, right, you start looking like a quarter point here, a half point there. All of a sudden, for how like it all comes down. We try to keep in mind every single conversation we have on this show, every single episode we do. A lot of the big stuff is the macro stuff, like what does Trump say to Trudeau? What does Ford say to about electricity in the U.S. or like these are the big stories, but also like. What about the family with what about the single mom or the single dad or what about the parents or what about the grandparents on the fixed income or what about the new Canadians or what about the people that are waiting for hip replacement surgery and they can't work and they're on disability or what about the people on EI or what about the people what about someone that just took out a new loan or what about poor Jespo who just found out he has black mold in his walls and he's going to have to tear open the whole. But
that's what I'm thinking about.
Is
anyone
for those people, if a quarter point moves here or there and you've got variable rate mortgages and you've got this, that, and the other, and all of a sudden your household's having to try to find the average household. I'm not talking about those of you that are living in the lap of luxury. Good for you. You worked hard for it. You deserve it. But I'm talking about the people that when your monthly budget changes by $150 or $600 or $1,000 or $3,000, all of a sudden this is really problematic. And that is real life stuff for people in their own backyard.
Think about people who have a tight budget right now, even people who are making good money, a family of 5 or whatever, and everyone's working, a couple of kids are in school or whatever. Just imagine with all this shifting going on, like 10% more added costs added to your monthly bills or whatever. It could be astronomically. It could destroy you, right? And then another thing I wanted to mention, you were talking about cars with our first guest right off the bat, and someone mentioned it, I think Yttrium in the chat, but yeah, there was an awesome segment on Fox Business News yesterday where they went to a car dealership, and I think the segment was trying to promote that more car manufacturing should come back to America, but it backfired on them because the guy, he was talking about pickup trucks, especially Dodge Rams, at his lot at a car dealership in the States. He said that this truck already, now higher price than it was a decade ago or whatever, $80,000, stock. Just this week or in the last, 3 months since Trump has come into office is now close to $100,000. Yeah. He's like, how am I supposed to pay this truck? And then they went back to the reporter who had sent them, out to this lot segment. And she stammered for a bit. I forget her name, but she basically tried to spin it as this is why Donald Trump is trying to bring car manufacturing back to America, like blah, blah, blah. And it's just, to me, it's crazy. Like,
I guess if you would have kept the car salesman on the line, it would have been, but for you,
100%.
Price.
And then she was talking about, well, we need to sell more cars, American vehicles made here in the UK and places. And in my head, I'm thinking, nobody drives a truck in the UK. First of all, like, there's no room to park trucks in the UK. They're driving small vehicles. Electric vehicles are on the rise, but it's wild to think that they're trying to spin this as good when even the people they go to in the segment are saying this is horrible.
This is what I'm saying. Once you start losing the grassroots, once somebody's trying to find out where that extra $600 a month is going to come from, and they're all of a sudden, this is the time of year where people are registering their kids for summer camps. This is the time of year where people are starting to think about where you're going to travel for the summer, where you're going to go. This is people thinking around the clock. What can we afford to do as a family? What can I afford to do as an individual? This is when you start to lose people. Super Chat Ken says the markets know that Trump is a blowhard. The markets fell knowing that across-the-board tariffs would be quickly tempered with many exceptions. He says otherwise the markets would have tanked much worse. And sure enough, some tariffs will already be modified today. He says Trump is already folding. That's Super Chat Ken's assessment. I love it. You'll never hear Trump use that word, will you? He'll find some way to spin it as though this is proof that it's working. I thought the border thing is hilarious. We're not spending too much time talking about it because I just, not to say that fentanyl's not a threat, not a scourge, and obviously not fentanyl generally speaking, but the fentanyl epidemic, illegal fentanyl, the flow of it across borders needs to be stopped. But did you see numbers that were released yesterday? This is absolutely astounding. You want to know the discrepancy when it comes to fentanyl coming across the border? And I'm not trying to pile on Mexico right now either, but here's a reality check. Here's a reality check. What is it? 21,000 pounds of fentanyl from Mexico estimated from Mexico into the U.S. You know how many pounds from Canada estimated into the United States?
I
43.
Yeah.
Not 4,300.
Yeah.
43.
Somebody equated it to, they were talking about China and Mexico. He's like, imagine like train cars coming over through the border to Mexico and over the water from China. And then what we have in Canada crossing the border is a bag of fertilizer, which is still, like, we know
43 pounds of fentanyl is a lot.
A speck of fentanyl
can
kill you. We get it. But just the comparison, it's if you visually, it's mind-boggling. Right?
100%. Hey, listen, while we're talking dollars, while we're talking money, while we're talking investments, I know that there are a lot of people that are feeling uncertainty right now that need a studied voice and a steady hand. And we've been proudly partnering with North Road Investment Council, and I wanted to just remind you of the resources that they have on their website. You can check out, and this is all easily linked to at northroadic.com. You can find out more about what they do, who they are. You can subscribe to their YouTube channel right off their main page, connect with them on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook. This is a team that understands the nuance in circumstances like this with uncertainty around the world. North Road Investment Council, experts in particular in using passive investment tools in your investment portfolio, because they recognize that life's financial journey does not always follow a straight path. And their Edmonton-based team partners with discerning families, foundations, and associations on these winding paths. Expert navigation through complexities like wealth accumulation, investment advisory services for clients across the country, both in and outside of Alberta. Your fiduciary financial advisors will offer a strategic approach to wealth management that aligns with your vision. You can learn more. Reach out to Marshall and Carrie and their team at northroadic.com. Our friends at Friesen Brothers were talking about buying local and sourcing local since way before it was cool, Johnny. Friesen Brothers celebrating 70 years in 2025, still family-owned, Alberta-grown, Alberta-owned. You go into a Friesen Brothers, whether it's the produce, whether it's their butcher shop, wherever it is. I mean, I particularly love the variety of Alberta-based honey that they carry. Do you know that they raise bees on the roof of their South Edmonton location? How cool is that? Friesen Brothers is as local as it gets. If you want to buy Canadian and put Canadian products, many of them Alberta products, on your family's dinner table, start at Friesen Brothers. Friesen.com is where you can find their Family Essentials flyer. We love it. And circle your calendar for the first of every month, where they'll take 15% off your entire grocery bill of $75 or more. You can find out more details at friesen.com. Athabasca University, in addition to making that amazing interview with Bertrand Bickersteth possible, has been helping Canadians across the country, tens of thousands of Canadians, pursue their post-secondary goals without barriers. And I mean that on a number of fronts. For a lot of you, it's a remote location. You're not living anywhere near a brick and mortar university, and that's been standing in the way of you pursuing your goals, whether it's undergraduate education, maybe it's an MBA, whatever it is. The only commute to Athabasca University is to your device. They've also got amazing financial supports. They've got special initiatives for Indigenous, First Nations, and Métis students, Inuit students across the country as well. The Board of Governors unanimously approving a 10% tuition cut for those particular students. I mean, just remarkable things happening at Canada's Open University. They earn that title each and every day. You can learn more about the AU Advantage. Check out their programs and courses online at athabascau.ca. And I wish I was joking, by the way, about the black mold, but it's been confirmed. I'm going to drag you guys through our family journey, because we're experiencing something like this.
You've got it.
I've been talking. Well, we've been talking about this. Like, if you discover this in your home, and we've just made this discovery, so I know who I'm calling. We've been partnering with Complete Care Restoration for years now, and this is the first emergency disaster. I'll take you through it. I'll tell you how it all goes. They've got more than 25 years of experience restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind. So whether it's us, that nasty discovery, or maybe it's asbestos, or maybe it's smoke damage, or maybe a pipe burst, or maybe there's one of those gnarly sewer backups, if you know, you can't leave it. You got to get the experts on it as soon as possible. They've been restoring properties and rebuilding peace of mind for a quarter century. You can find them online. Emergency services available at CompleteCareRestoration.ca. Tough reminder from Ken in the chat, who says, a reminder, West Texas Intermediate WTI is $65.40 right now. Price of oil says each dollar under 74 costs Alberta $750 million in the budget picture. This is why, interesting conversation with Doug Griffiths just the other day, our March 3rd episode, if you want to check it out. President, CEO of the Chamber, former cabinet minister, conservative cabinet minister, talking about the Alberta budget and where Finance Minister Horner priced oil. That's it's one of the first things that business analysts and, quite frankly, journalists and most Albertans, I think, look at any budget is where do they have the price of oil pegged, because that goes a long way, right? You can have a rosy forecast, a really ambitious forecast that can make the budget look like it's going to be a surplus budget, but if that's not where the world tells you that oil's going to be, then you end up in a huge deficit position. So it's a good point from Ken.
I would say it's time to bury your Bitcoin in the backyard.
Yes. Good call. How's Bitcoin? Bitcoin's been bouncing around a lot. I don't know. I know that, people, this is kind of a polarizing topic. But
your Bitcoin, like, as a physical, like, just,
no,
like,
that's
like
not a
not
thing.
A real, but just kind
it's
of
not a thing.
Okay.
It's not a thing. Although you can buy them online. They're just for fun.
Yeah,
do not ever accept a physical Bitcoin for payment of anything.
No, I just mean like
you kind of have to say this because some people get the phone
nostalgia,
calls and then all of a sudden you find out that like Granny got a call from the CRA and she's buying Best Buy gift cards at the grocery till to like pay off the CRA, and you're going, it's a scam, it's a trap, it's a trap. Hey, Johnny, as we wrap, I want to let you know a couple of things. Speaking of that, and speaking of don't ever pay CRA off with Best Buy gift cards, but March is Fraud Prevention Month, and so we're bringing in my mind, the foremost expert on fraud prevention in the country. Julie Matthews is going to be joining us on the next episode of Real Talk. That's going to be the 6th of March. And we also wanted to let you know, effective immediately, the Real Talk Golf Classic is open. Registration, that is, for sponsors, players, and volunteers. Check out the events link on our website. We hope to see you at the ranch on the 19th of June.
Real Talk is hosted by Ryan Jesperson, executive producer Josh Dunford, technical producer John Hicks, general manager Katie Cook-Chivers, account coordinator Lawrence Derlego, human resources Lena Shepard, website design Mike Johnston, voiceover by me, Carrie Skelton. Real Talk's editorial board is Supriya Dwivedi, Ahmed Ali, Brandy Morin, Ann Castleman, Corey Hogan, Harman Kandola, Catherine O'Neill, and Chris Henderson. Member Emerita, Julie Rohr. Real Talk is recorded in Edmonton, Alberta on Treaty 6 territory, the traditional and ancestral territory of the Cree, Dene, Blackfoot, Saulteaux, and Nakota Sioux, home to the Métis settlements and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Real Talk is a relay project. For more, check out ryanjesperson.com.